Hi everyone, my name's Abigail de I'm an author and welcome to my YouTube channel. This channel is not new. I've had it since 2014 and I posted videos pretty consistently all the way up until 2020. The main content that I posted was book reviews, book TBRs, book hauls. I also did some lifestyle stuff, some vlogs, but for the most part I was a booktube channel. But when I became a published author in 2019, I felt a bit awkward making book reviews, so I stopped, and eventually I just stopped making videos altogether because there was nothing more I really wanted to say, and I didn't really want to pivot into talking about writing exclusively. So I've been gone for a while, but recently I've had some things that I've wanted to talk about, and I have been making some shorts, which I've been uploading here, but I also have some ideas for things I want to discuss that take longer than 3 minutes. So I'm going to make some long form videos as well. I want to take this first video to talk about my publishing journey and also reintroduce myself. So let's start from the beginning. When I was born, okay, maybe not that far. In middle school, when I was 11, I started to feel serious about writing. I was writing all the time. I wrote in between classes. I wrote during the reading period at school. I wrote at lunch. I wrote after school. Basically, any chance I got, I was writing. And I used to write epic fantasy books a la Lord of the Rings, but obviously, being 11, they weren't good. But at the same time, I learned a lot and I enjoyed writing them. I never actually finished anything besides maybe one draft, and that was as far as I got. I wrote the ending and I was just kind of like, okay, I'm done. But in high school, I got introduced to Twilight and I started reading paranormal romance, urban fantasy, and through that, I eventually transitioned into reading contemporary fiction. At the point when I was reading a lot of contemporary fiction, I got the idea for what would become my first book, I Knew Him. So I Knew Him was a coming of age story about a bisexual teenager who auditions for a play, which is completely out of the norm for him. Through the play, he meets somebody that he falls in love with, and he starts to wonder if maybe now's the time to come out. So the first draft I wrote when I was 15 or 16, and it was not amazing because I was a teenager, but it was a completed draft. And I knew when I was writing it that this was like going to be the one. That was going to be my first book. I just had a feeling. Over the years, I revised it as best as I could. And every couple of years, I would take it off, dust it out, try to rework it. When I got to university, that's when I really had the tools to write the story that I envisioned, and I was able to transform it into something that was queryable. But in the middle of all of that, I had a little bit of a side quest. I got really into Tumblr, and I discovered Tumblr poetry through Amanda Lovelace's Tumblr. Her Tumblr introduced me to a lot of poets from that era, like Rupi Kaur, Tristram Matir, Nikita Gill, and reading their poetry, it really inspired me because I had read poetry in high school. I never liked poetry, and suddenly this poetry was showing me that there was another way to write poetry. So I started writing my own poetry. I really did need to write this poetry at this time in my life, but once I was finished writing it and revising it as best as I could, I decided to self-publish it. And I will say, I will admit that I kind of saw this as a get-rich-quick scheme because I saw how Amanda Lovelace had done, and I thought that I could achieve the same wonders just by putting it out there. And I did have somewhat of a following on Tumblr, so I thought, surely they're gonna buy it. And I think about 3 people bought it. At the end of the day, I'm really glad that that's what happened because about 6 months later, I just felt kind of embarrassed by the whole thing, so I ended up unpublishing it. And I returned my attention to I Knew Him. So when I started my master's program, I had a little more free time than I did in my bachelor's. I didn't have as many courses to take every year. And so when I wasn't writing my assignments and working on My projects for my classes, I was revising I Knew Him. So in 2017, 2018, I decided to query it. I don't really remember how many people I queried, but it was a fair number. And I just kept getting rejections. I think I got one personalized rejection, but it was very brief, just sort of like, this isn't the book for me kind of thing. The rest of it was all just form rejections. You know, as time went on, I started to wonder if the issue wasn't so much the book and my writing, but if it was just the agent thinking that a bisexual YA romance wasn't marketable. There were some books that had bi protagonists, but it wasn't as much of a thing as it is now. So I thought that maybe that was playing into getting rejected, and I started to think maybe I should self-publish, but I really didn't have the funds to self-publish. Like, I wanted to do a good job editing it and getting a good cover, and I just did not have the means to do any of that. So I started doing Twitter pitch contests. I did one pitch contest where I got one like, and it was a small LGBTQ press. So I thought to myself, this might be the way to go, because as a queer publisher, they obviously already have books with bisexual protagonists, so that's not a problem. They're not going to tell me to change it or anything. So I decided to go ahead and submit to them. And so they offered me a contract. At that time, as I got the contract, I literally just started a new job. And so, you know, I was so excited. The world was full of possibilities. I tweeted an announcement as soon as I could, and the announcement did really well. Like, I think that this was a case of right place, right time. The Twitter algorithm wasn't borked like it is now, and book Twitter hadn't really blown up to the extent that it did in a couple of years' time. So I didn't have very many followers. Like, I had some followers who came from this YouTube channel. I had some people that I knew in real life. But even so, the announcement got like 200 likes or something like that. And every day I would go on my Twitter and there would be more people retweeting it or liking it. So I added it on Goodreads, and people were adding it on Goodreads. Even YouTubers that I love to watch were adding it. And I was like, this is it. This is my moment. This is the start of something amazing. For that first year, it was amazing. I didn't sell like record-breaking numbers, but it was more than I anticipated. Like, I think that first year I sold 500 copies of my book. That just blew me away. And I was so confident that with my second book, I would beat that, and I would just keep building on the momentum. So while I've been editing my first book, I've been working on a second, and by the time my first book came out, I was pretty much ready to submit the second book to the editor. And this book, I think, was a mistake. I was happy with it at the time. Looking back, there are some things that I would like to change, but overall I was happy with it. But it was just not a good marketing move. My second book was called We Go Together, and it had a bisexual female protagonist. And while it had a relatively lighthearted vibe, the main character was going through some pretty traumatic stuff. She was processing an assault that had happened to her years ago and coming to terms with it while she and her friends were going on these really fun adventures. So it was a different vibe from I Knew Him, and I think it was just a little too different for readers to also pick it up. And in addition, it came out in 2020, so, you know, not the best time to be promoting anything. It did not do well, to say the least. And that kind of took the wind out of my sails. You know, I was flying high for like a year and a half. I was so excited. I was working on a third book. I think I even finished it before my second book came out, and I was just raring to go. But then as the months went on and I saw the enthusiasm for the second book really dwindle to nothing extremely quickly in comparison to I Knew Him, I was just so crushed. Like, to put things into perspective, the first month that it came out in the middle of the month. The first report I got was for 2 weeks. I sold like, I think 15 copies maximum, and most of those came from the publisher's website. So, you know, people who already knew me were dedicated to my work. That was really cool. I was really excited to see that. So I wasn't too concerned because I thought, you know, in the coming months, the other retailers are going to report their sales at a slower rate. So they'll come in and it's going to be similar to I Knew Him, but it wasn't. There was 1 month in that early period where I sold 0 copies of We Go Together. All of my sales were coming from I Knew Him, and it just crushed me. And I just couldn't get past it. In the middle of all of this, I had been working on some poetry. I had taken my first poetry collection that I unpublished and I reworked it. I deleted some poems, I added some new ones, and I released it. Then after that, I released a second collection, which were mostly poems that I wrote during a lockdown. And that kind of kept me going, but writing my novel was just so hard. Like, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Like 2 years later, I decided that it was time. I started working on my third novel, which was called Destined to Be Normal. And I hired an editor because I just couldn't look at it anymore. So the editor gave me lots of great feedback, and I basically just dragged myself through publishing this book. Like, my heart was just not in it, but I thought that I'd been away for too long and I needed to get back in the race. And this book was going to be a return to form. It was another pairing, and it had different quirks, but it was a similar premise. You know, there was a theater arts component. I thought this was gonna bring the readers back, but by the time I actually got it all together, like, it was 2023, and I just had no willpower or energy to actually promote it. I just put it out there. I made a few posts and I just kind of said, whatever happens, happens. Like, I just don't care anymore. And then I did some more poetry. In 2024, after taking another long break, I decided that I was going to try with my fourth book, which I'd actually also written around the same time as I wrote my third book. I was just full of inspiration and I was just so excited. That draft was a mess, so it took me a while to get through it, but while I was working on it, I started to feel that spark coming back. So this book, my fourth book, was called Be True, and it was a companion novel to my first book, I Knew Him. Different main character, same cast of characters with a couple extras. When I was revising it and reading it over again, the writing quality compared to I Knew Him was so different that I just felt like I couldn't release it attached to I Knew Him the way that it was. So I had been thinking for a while of asking for my rights back from the publisher. So basically asking the publisher to delist my book and give me the rights back to republish it. So with my third book, I ended up self-publishing it. There were a few reasons for that. One of the main reasons was that I had taken so long in writing it that I just didn't want to wait anymore. And I also just wanted to have more control over the pricing and putting it on sale and stuff like that. And I'm glad that I did, because even though I wasn't selling a lot of copies, I was still making more on it than I was on my small press books. Because in recent years, after the excitement for I Knew Him dwindled, I was making like 40 cents a month from my royalties. Like, I was selling one ebook and I was making 40 cents. So I thought, if I'm only selling one copy a month, at least I can control how much I'm paid. So I decided that I wanted to have more control over my first two books, and I asked for my rights back. There was no problem asking for my rights back. Everything was fine. I began to work on I Knew Him again. And I don't know, I thought that I was going to hate going through it, but I loved it. I had so much fun turning things around, and I changed a couple things that had bothered me the first time, and I just had such a blast. Even though I have not been making a living at all on these books, my last year, 2025, was my best year in a really long time, and it just kind of reinvigorated me and made me feel like I can still do this. I can still build something. I did not peak too early. let's friggin' go. That's where we are now. I Knew Him and the companion novel Be True are going to be coming out April 15th, 2026. You can pre-order it right now, and you can also request an ARC. I'll post the links for all that down below, but my goal this time around is to really put myself out there and just try my absolute best. I'm not going to let anything bring me down. I just have to go for it. I just have to try. So I want to take you along on this journey with me. I also wanted to share some tips and tricks that I've learned over the years and share my experience. And hopefully you guys find that interesting. Hopefully it's helpful to someone, and hopefully you stick around. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.